The last part, we wrote a program that figured out how long it would take me to pay off a mortgage. I put up the code just so you can see it again. And just to refresh your memory on that, if I say python mortgage.py, came up and printed a number, $824,000. One of the things that you might want to do with this program is extend it to produce a little bit more output. I want to talk about the print statement a little bit here. So let's say you wanted to extend this program to print a table of some kind. Like maybe I'm going to print out the month, maybe like a schedule for a mortgage, maybe the month, the amount of interest paid, the amount of remaining principal, for instance. Maybe I have like total payment minus the interest and then the amount of principal. So let's say I wanted to print out a table. So I use the print statement like that. What's going to happen in this modified version of code is that it will run and I'll get a lot of output kind of showing me different things. I mean, essentially the first column of that is the month and then the amount of interest that is being paid and the amount of principal that's being paid and how much is left. The problem is that output just looks terrible. I mean, I don't really want to read that. I mean, it's 15 digits being printed out. It doesn't align nicely or anything like that. So one of the things that we might want to do is just format the output a little bit. So I want to talk briefly about how to do formatted printing because we may use that in other lessons in the future. So let's say you had some variables. I don't know, like name is IBM, shares is 100, price is 32.2 or something. And you wanted to format that. Okay, first of all, the print statement, if you don't do anything, will just print those values with a space between it. If you want to change that, there are a couple of ways to do it. One of the ways that you can do it is you can use it's essentially the percent operation with strings. What you do is you write a little format string that looks like that, and then you say percent, and then you supply the values. What's going to happen here are these variables are going to get plugged into these percent codes and formatted. The actual meaning of these codes, by the way, S is a string, 10 is referring to the width that's going to be printed. And there are different modifiers, like this code at the end is saying print a number in 10 characters wide, but with 2 decimal places. So that's one way to format. A little bit more modern approach is you might see somebody using the format operator. This is going to look quite a bit different, but it's accomplishing kind of the same thing. What I'm doing here is asking Python to format some values and print them out in sort of the same way. What's happening here is each little part in curly braces is getting filled in with one of the arguments to this format method. So name is going into the first one, shares is going into the second one, and so forth. And then again, the code is sort of defining what the formatting is. That greater than, by the way, that means put everything on the right. So right justify. If I were to flip that to a less than, you would find all the values aligning up on the left. There's a couple of different ways of sort of formatting things, and that is the kind of thing that I might do in this program. Like if I wanted to have sort of nicely formatted output, I could change this print statement to use something like that. Like maybe I'm going to have like a 5-digit month. Maybe the interest will be 10 digits with 2 decimal points, and then I'll do that same thing for the other values as well. Maybe what I'm doing here is trying to like more nicely format the output. Just enclose those values there. If I do that and run the program again, you'll find that it makes a much nicer table to look at. Okay, so now everything is nicely lined up. It's very column oriented, much easier on the eyes. If I wanted to put a header on the file, I might do something similar up here. Let's do format here. So we're going to format some strings. What I'm going to do is specify kind of the headers of this thing. So the headers are the month, and then we have the interest, and then we have the, the principal amount, and then the remaining. Let's go ahead and run that, and we should get a kind of a nice table now showing up. If I scroll up enough, you should be able to find some headers on that. This is the kind of thing that you would do if you wanted to have, much nicer output showing up. Kind of another extension to that is you might actually want to modify the program to write that to a file. So I thought I would also mention briefly how to do that. If you wanted to take that output and redirect it to a file, you can use the open command to open up a file. So you give it a file name. You tell it you want to open it for writing. Okay, so this is, open a file for writing. And then what I can do in my print statements, tell Python that I want that output to go to that file. So I'm going to add this little extension, file equals out there. And if I modify the code to do that, file is equal to out, you'll find that it produces that in a file instead. One thing we have to do when we work with files, you have to close them as well. So when you're done with the file, you close it. So let's go ahead and run that. Now we don't see any output showing up here, but it did make a file called schedule.txt that looks like that. This is the kind of thing that you would do in a script to kind of produce much nicer output. If you need to write output to a file, this is also the technique for doing that. We'll say more about files in later lessons, but this should be enough to get started for simple program.